Welcome to the Nuclear Snail channel. This time I'm gonna show you this Rebreather Tank Prop that I've made. So it goes on the neck like this, the hose goes to the front. Let's look at finished proper pictures. Alright, let's go over its details and its design, and then I'll get to showing you how I made it. One spoiler up front, the base for this was a simple tea can or coffee can, like a metal storage can. Doesn't really sound like that anymore, and I will also get to the part why. How I stabilized it a bit to be less tin can-like. But anyway, let's just go in random order. So first of all, the decals and the stencils and all that, what you see here, it's a so-called decal or detail pyramid, or detail layering, or detail nesting, however you want to call it. So what you see here is a relatively simple decal, and it's just a stencil. Up here we have another one, but in a different color, which is, by the way, complementary contrast to the olive colored straps right here. And here in the middle we have one that is raised on this mechanic robotic looking part, and it's also, as you can see, engraved or etched or embossed. So this is the boss detail, not just because it's embossed, but also because it just is a big piece of shiny metal right here with a lot of red paint inside of it, and it's literally raised up from the rest on this robotic part. So this robotic looking part, which is, by the way, a drywall connector, well, it serves like sort of a frame for it, right? And if we look at these three, this middle main one is surrounded by those other two. So this is a detail pyramid, and we have, look at this detail on this thing, the plate itself is a detail, and on top of that we have even more detail, and then we go even to the tiniest detail where it says seal check with some wiped off marker here, so you don't know anymore when the seal check was, you just know it was somewhere. Telling a bit of a story here, I always try to do that because props tell stories and costumes tell stories, at least good ones do. So this is a detail pyramid principle. I use that a lot, I think almost in all my props. I also mentioned the complementary contrast, so we have the usual red highlights that I love using here and here. On the other side I decided to go with this white, which is however not really white, because I always take care that my, especially white stencils, but also all other, get a bit of dirt and grime so they don't look so new and fresh. Alright, so color-wise we have a lot of olive and black here on the main part. These usual straps right here I have. Metal is of course also a color, and it is present here. A lot of it on this side. And on the other side, like, why is it not red? Why doesn't it repeat that? Well, it gets boring at some point. It's not really something that I calculate in my mind or something, it's more of a feeling. So it was like, okay, another signal kind of color, but not red, would be nice here. Let's go with yellow. So this is like, you turn it around and it's like, oh, it's another machine component in there that's nested in there. It belongs in it, obviously, but it's also something different. So it tells a bit of another story that's not quite exactly the same as here, just purely visually speaking. And to make this part not too boring to look at, I also added this small stencil here. And here we have this pull tab kind of thing, strap, and as you saw in the pictures, if pulled on this, then the container opens. And I'll get to that actually right now. To do that, I'm gonna have to remove 3 bolts, which are just they're not screwed in, they just sit in there, but in a sturdy way that they don't fall out by themselves, at least not unless you jump like really a lot, but I think not even then. So I can just pull them out though, like this. The reason they are there, you will see in a sec, it's to stabilize this whole lid. Now this is an additional feature that I just decided to cram in there. So if I was really building a storage container kind of thing with a focus on it, I would of course have made a more elegant solution. So storing something that you really need quick access to in this is maybe not such a good idea. It also holds without those bolts, as you see, nothing falls out or whatever, and even bumping into it slightly doesn't make it fall out, but it does make it tilt, and the bolts prevent this from happening, it tilting. Okay, and now doesn't work every time, okay, but what I'm gonna do now is just try and yank on it. There we go. And I need to check if I don't slam my elbow into my cactus over here. That would be nasty, poor cactus. It also has this retention strap right here, so when loading and unloading, it can just be opened like this, and also so you don't like fly away with your elbow into someone's face or someone's cactus. Right, and inside here you cannot see it, but you saw it on the pictures. There is some foam in there. It all looks ugly. It's not really super well attached, but just good enough to store something that is not extremely important in there without it being shredded to pieces by the bolts on the inside and the plastic and all that. The stuff that you will see that when I get to the how I made it part. Okay, yeah, stuff can be put in there. I mean, it was a can originally. Why didn't I just reuse the lid? The original lid, because it just didn't work. It's hard to explain, but I made this and this works. So and I can just put this back in, and I mean, if left undisturbed, it can be just left like this, and it also sits straight and looks nice, right? So can either leave it like this and be able to pop it open quick. A really important thing when pulling this though is to pull this top part away and not cant it so that this bottom part goes in. So it should not like rotate on a pivotal axis, because then it just cants itself inside and you need to get a screwdriver and what's not. Again, this is not a perfect system. This is not something I would use to get in and out all the time, but storing something in there that is well, accessed like now and then could be a thing, but when pushing this back in, it's also important to just be gentle and not put it in like this. Alright, this is bad, this is always bad. When it's canted like this, just put it in gently, so it's symmetric on all sides. Pull it out without canting. Right, and now I need to align the holes. So the hole is aligned to the inner hole now, and I can just plop in the bolts back into place. Give it a gentle tap with something hard, and with the bolts in place, it will just stay in perfect alignment. On to other details. Attachment can be done by using these standard hooks right here. And also we have some metal D-ring loops right here. And these can be obviously clipped to whatever, to another set of D-rings or any other rings, anything that will clip basically. And through these it's possible to put a piece of belt like this, right? And then this can be bolted using a bolt and a washer through here to another piece of equipment. Right, or both possibilities at the same time, or since these here are attached to the can just in this spot, it moves here a bit, and there is a bit of space under here, so any sort of belt can go under here, and it also could be longer, so it goes under both, for example, something like this, and there we have again a possibility of attachment. This up here I left intentionally empty, so usually there is like a number inside of this stencil. I blanked it out so it didn't also spray into the number letters. I just didn't want to load it too much, so it needed some sort of a detail here, but I didn't want it to be like a really big detail. Big in terms of intricacy, because I wanted the intricacy to be really pyramid focused on this, as I said before. Alright, I think, as usual, I could talk forever about the design of this, and at the same time I already feel like I mentioned the most important things anyway. So let's just get to the part of how I made this thing. So here's how I made it. Keep in mind, this is a how I made it kind of thing, not how you can make it step by step. Hopefully you get some insights into this that give you some inspiration and whatnot. But since I work a lot with junk and available parts and all that, and also since I want you to use your own brain and make your own props, this is how I made this, not how you make yours, in whatever style you make it. Anyway, let's get to it. So this is a tea can or coffee can or whatever. It's made from a thin sheet metal. Got it for a couple of bucks at a local store. First of all, I removed the lid, loosening up this metal part using my pliers, and then I take it to sandpaper and remove all the paint by hand. Nah, I'm just kidding. I just took my power file to it and removed the paint, not all of it, just most of it. Then I do the usual thing I do for this kind of a, let's call it found it in a bunker surface, which looks like this in the end. So this is a mask. This is olive paint, army color olive paint. This is black. This is universal spray paint, or universal spray glue rather than paint. And this is Mr. B, and there is a film and theater dust inside of that. So to achieve this effect, I spray with black first, then while it's still not completely dry, on top of it with some olive, and then I spray it with Mr. B with some dust. And after that, while it's still drying, I also apply another coat of black, and with that I touch with my fingers. I'm also wearing rubber gloves, by the way, or vinyl gloves or whatever, so it's not right on my fingers. But I basically am just being intentionally sloppy with it, tearing parts of still drying black paint off of it as it's still dry. And I apply another layer of Mr. B. I might actually make a video about this kind of technique, because I think a lot of you would be interested in that, but it's really, really easy. So just a couple of messy layers with some dust in between, and then I let it dry. After it's dry, so after a couple more minutes, so I can touch it with my bare hands without it leaving all the paint on my hands, I take this 1mm sheet of ABS plastic with the intention of rolling it up like this and chucking it in there, so it is trying to uncoil, pressing against the metal walls, trying to to give it some additional stability. I cut it exactly to the right size, so the whole plastic sheet will be right under this retention line that we can also see here. This is where this lid stuff said before, right? So I cut it to the right size. I also round off the edges a bit and even sandpaper them a bit, just in case, because I will be working on this, sticking my hand into it, and I don't want to get scratched up on plastic, which is a thing you can do. Anyway, I roll it up. I don't care that it's a bit too long. I just roll it up and chuck it in there, and then I depress it with the screwdriver until it's right under that water line or retention line right here. It's not going anywhere now. It's just sitting in there, pressing against the walls, giving it stability. I make a sketch for one of the parts, one of the sides, and this is I think it's a cover of an ashtray or something, and this right here is a rubber something that I found in my junk crate, and it has just the perfect size to slot this male side of the gas mask hose in it. This is what it looks like from the other side. Leaves enough thread for it to be threaded in later. I sketched the straps now. This is an important part of the design process, like how am I going to be attaching it to other stuff later on, right? Well, some sort of a strap around it works fine. And then, as you can see here, these straps, they take up a lot of space, and they kind of determine that whatever goes in between would have to go either on top of them, or just be slim enough to go in between them, or somehow go under them. So doing the required stuff first already solves a lot of design problems and already gives a lot of guidance. And I just attached those straps using some bolts. So at each end of those straps there is like this aluminum insert that serves for that buckle or that clasp not to slide off of it entirely, right? So I just drilled through that really carefully, so I can just use this thing that's already in place as a washer to stick a bolt through it, and then stick it through a hole that I made also in the can, obviously, and then I just fasten it with a washer and a bolt from the other side, from the inside of the can. And I do this for the other strap as well, and this is what we have here now. There you can see the bolt sticking out. I trim that down later so the space inside is more usable. Right, this ashtray thing, I mark off where I want to chomp it off, and I use just some... God, what it's called? This thing. I use this thing to just chomp a hole into it. And this is not big enough by far. In the end, I end up just chomping a bigger hole. I even removed these parts right here because I realized that these holes here are unnecessary. Just ignore those. So basically, it can be best summed up as I just mess around with it until it kind of serves its purpose while looking completely ugly without the thing on top of it. Now, in order for it to not be just this metal part and then it looks straight at the bottom of the can, I also add this ABS plastic, again 1 millimeter thick. I scratch it up a bit, and this sits under there so that there is some visual protection, so to speak, and also adds additional stability to the whole piece. This is my awl, which I just stab through the middle of this butt of the can. And this serves as orientation for this hole saw right here, which is exactly the same size as this part minus the threads. So I just want to make a hole in there into which I can just thread in this gas mask connector, this screwy in male part, and it just goes in there. Right. I also make a hole into the plastic thing. It's all eyeballed as it gets, I'm not measuring it out particularly well, I just go. And this is why I had those holes in that thing right here before, right, so that I can bolt this thing in place. But I then realized these just create problems. They don't let the main gas mask hose connector through. They are also unnecessary because when this thing sits like this, the connector itself presses this rubber or plastic thing down, and there is no additional fastening needed. So that's why I'll also chomp those off. So it looks like this then. And then I just thread it in. It is a bit bent here because I used the pliers for the final couple of tugs here. So it's really threaded in. I also cannot really screw it out anymore, so it's just fixed in place. But as long as it's not falling out, it's fine by me. I also really double check that it is not easy to pull out. Okay, to the other side, this is a part of some measurement tool or something like that. I first consider using the original lid, but it doesn't end up working out. I consider just plopping this in, but then I'm like, when looking at it from the side, it's kind of a pity that you can see the yellow thing from the side. So I decide to add a wooden piece under it, so connect that yellow part right here with another wooden piece, and this here is again just a visual protection. So through these holes, because this thing hops on top of this, so through these holes which I leave open, I don't see the wood, because wood is a rather unfitting material for this build. I like wood in general, but not for this. Anyway, before I get there, I just cut out a piece of ABS plastic, 1 millimeter, just using my scissors, and use these existing holes right here to slot in this really way too dark in this photo piece of foam in there that just sits there, so that again we have some sort of a different material that serves as some sort of a additional story and also visual protection, so to speak, so that we're not just looking at the blank material that's underneath that, kind of ruining immersion. But with this piece of little foam, it just looks a lot better in the end. Okay, so I use those 3 bolts and this plastic thing. I could have just glued the foam piece in, by the way, but I don't like glue, I don't trust glue, I instead use bolts. And also these 3 bolts on the outside look cool, so that's why. I fish out this drywall connector out of my crate of random metal parts. And yeah, looks good. Before attaching it with a bolt here and a bolt here, I buff it up, sandpaper it up a bit on the edges. Meanwhile, I designed this decal here in Photoshop. I then vectorize it and engrave it on my CNC. And then I'm left with the result like this, which I then spray red. And then I let the paint dry, flip the whole thing over with the red face facing downwards on this concrete plate and rub it on it until only paint in the recesses is left. And this is the result. If you don't have a CNC, electro etching would be another option, or using letter punches. I have a video about letter punches on my channel. You can also only use predetermined letters when you use letter punches, but it is still a really good budget solution, which I also use sometimes when it has to go fast and doesn't need to be super fancy. Or you can also do a regular stencil. Okay, looks like this, looks cool. I attached everything together, so the 4 bolts in the corners attach it to this connector plate, and the connector plate is attached to the can itself. Now to the other side, I mentioned this already. I first try to make a rig to spin it in my handheld drill. On a stationary piece of paper. It doesn't work. I just take it to my normal power file. I didn't make a picture of that, but I just power file it roughly, and then it fits inside, has just the right size to fit in, and then it looks like this. I connect it with 3 bolts. For these I make additional holes in this part. 2 of those bolts are also used to attach this pull strap to the thing. And here I'm taping off the yellow part because I want to spray this black. In case it's canted out just a bit, I want it to be black and not the wood texture. I then also drill a hole in here, so it's in here for the other side of the retention strap, which you already saw, and this sits on the other hole. So these 2 are holding the pull tab and this one is holding the retention strap. And this is a piece of foam. I push it in down the bottom here, so it sits all the way on the bottom, and then also cut to proper size and roll up and glue in with double-sided adhesive tape this piece of foam, which is just enabling a better environment for tactical snacks or whatever is going to be stored in this container. So this is it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and if so, then consider supporting me on Patreon. It's my Patreon supporters that enable me to make these videos for everyone, and the link to my Patreon is in the video description. Also in the video description is a link to the Nuclear Snail community group on Facebook, so you can also join that, and I will see you in the next episode. Until then, have fun crafting and designing and playing your post-apocalyptic adventures.